It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the 19-year-old who murdered his family and wanted to become the worst school killer in UK history. Nicholas Prosper had been plotting an attack on his former primary school for months before he shot his mum, his younger brother and his sister. The court heard today that he wanted to carry out killing for the sake of killing. Also ahead, the government accused of punishing people with disabilities and the poor as it confirms plans to cut welfare spending by £5 billion a year. Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says the current system is failing the very people it's supposed to help. But charities say the government is choosing to penalise the worst off, and ministers should be ashamed. Plus, a Liverpool legend honoured by Aston Villa's most famous fan, Alan Hansen, receiving an MBE from Prince William today, just months after he was seriously ill in hospital. And the last of the few tributes to John Paddy Hemingway, the last surviving RAF pilot in the Battle of Britain, who has died at the age of 105. All that to come and more here on the UK Tonight. And lots to discuss throughout the course of the programme this evening, but we're going to start tonight with potentially significant developments in the war in Ukraine. You may well have been following this developing story on Sky News throughout the course of the late afternoon and evening. President Trump and President Putin, we understand, speaking at length today. The Russian leader agreeing to cease military action against Ukraine's energy infrastructure for 30 days. Now, we are being told that technical negotiations on a wider ceasefire and permanent peace will begin immediately. But how much the words tonight can translate into an actual deal is very much up for discussion, with Putin telling Trump that hostilities will only end if Western military assistance to Ukraine is stopped. And crucially, this is another conversation that didn't include Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said tonight that he would support any proposal that brings about peace, but talks about Ukraine without Ukraine will not bring about peace. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, to take us through what's been happening today, because it's been a really busy afternoon. I do have to point out that we are expecting to hear from President Trump at some time this evening. That could come within the next hour, but with President Trump, you know, timing, we never quite know when he will appear and what he will say. But James, talk us through what we've learned so far.
Yeah, hi, Sarah-Jane. I'll come to a Donald Trump Truth Social posting in a second, but we've just heard from Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. You alluded to some of it there, Sarah-Jane. His reaction to this call, this 2-hour call this morning, he's saying he hopes to speak to Donald Trump to receive more details about discussions with Putin. He says Ukraine would support a proposal to stop strikes on energy infrastructure. So that is what the Russians have said they will sign up to. But Zelensky says this on what is a key point. He says that Kyiv's partners would not agree to stop military aid, and he hopes it will continue. That is the crux of these discussions, and a stipulation by Russia that there is a cessation of military aid, weapons to Ukraine from the United States and presumably Ukraine. Also a stop in intelligence. That's what Putin wants. And of course, that would weaken Ukraine and it would strengthen Russia at a time when Russia is making advances. You have to think it's a red line, so red it's almost purple. And Zelensky indicates that there, that that's simply unacceptable. The question will be, how does Trump respond to that? Something else that Putin said, he was talking about the elimination of what he called the root causes of this conflict. Remember, for the Russians, the root causes with regard to Ukraine are about demilitarizing Ukraine, weakening the country to the extent that it would be vulnerable to a takeover by Russia in the near future or indeed distant future. So there's much in this discussion and the competing readouts from Washington and Moscow to displease Ukraine, and to a large extent, I think, boxes Kyiv into a corner, also boxes European leaders into a corner in terms of what happens next. The Russians, they know Donald Trump. That's why in this readout, you hear talk of a prisoner exchange, which of course is good news per se, but it also provides Donald Trump with an opportunity to claim some kind of result, help him to style himself as the deal maker in all of this. There's also, slightly bizarrely, talk of an ice hockey match, matches between Russian ice hockey players and American ice hockey players. It is weird, but actually there is a method in the madness on the part of the Russians. They have sussed that Donald Trump is a man who's comfortable talking sports. They've found a common ground. They also appreciate that many Americans think ice hockey before they think Ukraine, frankly, that Ukraine is a faraway war of which they see minimal relevance. So, you know, there is dressing around this deal, but at the heart of it are key red lines, key points on which Ukraine will object. In terms of Donald Trump, that Truth Social posting, Sarah-Jane, he's saying this. He said, it was a very productive, good call. We agreed to an immediate ceasefire on energy and infrastructure, not a full ceasefire, remember. And remember, the Americans made Ukraine bend over backwards to agree to a full 30-day ceasefire. Kyiv might well ask what happened to that. Trump ends this post saying that Putin and Zelensky would like to see an end to the war. That process is now in full force and effect, he says, and we will hopefully, for the sake of humanity, get the job done. The word hopefully doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Sarah-Jane, one final point. Both readouts speak of improved relations, bipartisan relations between the United States and Russia. That's a shared objective by Moscow and Washington. The question is, where does Ukraine fit into that bigger picture? It's not top, it seems, of the list of priorities for either Trump or Putin.
James, thank you. James Matthews keeping across this developing story for us here on Sky News this evening. Now, a court has heard today that a teenager who killed his family and was plotting an attack on his former primary school wanted to be a notorious mass murderer. Nicholas Prosper had been planning his crimes for months when he murdered his mother, Juliana Falcon, his brother Carl Prosper and sister Giselle Prosper at their flat in Luton in September last year. Ahead of his sentencing tomorrow, details of his plot, described as killing for the sake of killing, have now been revealed for the first time. Our national correspondent Tom Parmenter has this report.
This is Nicholas Prosper, at home with a pretend gun, practicing how he would kill. He'd researched school massacres and wanted to be the most prolific school shooter in the world. But his mother, Juliana, denied him. Late at night, last September, she discovered her son with a shotgun in his bedroom in their 8th floor flat. In the struggle that followed, he shot his mum, as well as his sister, 13-year-old Giselle, and his brother, 16-year-old Kyle. The day before, Nicholas Prosper had bought a shotgun and 100 cartridges, duping a legitimate seller with a forged shotgun certificate that he had produced. He'd done surveillance of his old school, St. Joseph's Catholic Primary, and was planning to target at least 30 children, aged 4 and 5. The depth of the research and the meticulous planning has only now emerged, but it was his mother's intervention here that was crucial. He'd planned to kill his family while they slept, but such was the noise and the violence in the flat that Nicholas Prosper knew the police would be on their way. So he left here 3 hours before the school would be open. He had the shotgun and 33 cartridges. But before he got there, he was arrested by a police patrol. In a victim impact statement in court, his father, Raymond, said, "Our lives will never be the same. For me personally, when I heard the horrific news on that day, part of my soul died too. This is a lose-lose situation for us all, and we have lost 4 family members." His son led a dysfunctional life online, was obsessed with a young girl in a video game, and had indecent images of children on his phone. He's already confessed to the family killings. This hearing will determine the length of his prison sentence, which will be delivered on Wednesday morning. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Luton.
In other news today, Downing Street has defended the proposed changes to the benefit system aimed at saving £5 billion a year. Amongst the plans, a tightening of the eligibility for the personal independence payment. It's the right thing to do, but charities say today it's immoral and devastating and could push more people living with disabilities into poverty. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has this next report.
Did you get sign-off for the benefit cuts? Is it the right thing to do?
The party that created the welfare state
Is it a return of the nasty party, sir?
is now cutting it back.
Did you come into politics to cut benefits, Deputy Prime Minister? A Labour cabinet has just signed off billions of pounds in cuts to the welfare budget. It was controversial in the room around the table, and it's going to be very controversial in the House of Commons with many a Labour MP.
Big changes on the way for Benefit Britain.
Liz Kendall.
This, then, a hard sell.
Millions of people who could work, trapped on benefits, denied the income, hope, dignity and self-respect that we know good work brings. And taxpayers paying millions more on the costs of failure.
The remedy, making it harder for people to claim disability benefits. Hundreds of thousands expected to lose personal independence payments if they suffer from milder mental health conditions and less severe physical difficulties.
Today we take decisive action, and I commend this statement to the House.
The goal, to shave £5 billion from the welfare bill by 2030. But in a concession to those sitting behind her, plans to also freeze disability payments dropped. Still not good enough for some.
My friends, my family are very angry about this, and they do not think this is the kind of action that a Labour government takes.
There are alternative, more compassionate ways to balance the books rather than on the back of sick and disabled people.
There are decisions made in this House that stay with you for the rest of your life. This is one of them. Trying to find up to £5 billion worth of cuts by manipulating, by changing the PIP rules, the criteria, will result in immense suffering, and we've seen it in the past, loss of life.
But the Conservatives push him for more.
This is too little, too late. The fact is, £5 billion just doesn't cut it with a bill so big going up so fast. She needed to be tougher. She should be saying, no more hard-working taxpayers funding the family next door not to work.
So will Liz Kendall have to come back for more?
Spending on working age, disability and sickness benefits will still rise over the Parliament, but we will be making savings by getting more people into work and by focusing those benefits on
So £5 billion of savings you've identified now. Are you saying that there will be billions more savings from the welfare bill in this Parliament?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is a major package of reforms.
But you're not ruling out more savings.
And I would suggest we talk about the proposals we are actually making, not those that we had.
Did you want to go further, though, Liz Kendall?
No, I
You did want to freeze PIP, didn't you?
I have never started from a sort of macho, tough position. I've never done politics like that.
You seem quite cross.
I am. You know I am cross. Because I've seen in my own constituency people written off to a life that is not the life they hoped for themselves.
Traditional Tory territory now taken on by a cash-strapped Labour government, whose search for savings could cast a long shadow over Starmer's domestic agenda. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, the government says these plans set out today will address a system that leaves people trapped out of work. The critics say the poverty levels will rise amongst people who want to work as a direct result of these proposals. Our social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson has been speaking to some of those affected.
Today, we tackle this problem head-on.
This problem, according to the government, is people like Katerina, young, not working and claiming disability benefits due to poor mental and physical health.
Really the only thing I have right now that's keeping me going. I kind of do depend on it a lot. I'm not so sure if I'll be able to get a job that will accept me.
But But the changes are being made because the number of people claiming sickness and disability benefits has soared. In Sutton-in-Ashfield, a former mining town in Nottinghamshire, almost a third of working-aged people are economically inactive. Many, like these, are young.
Do you apply for jobs?
Yeah.
I don't get anything back from places that I've tried.
Some people don't have the incentive to do it.
I'll mix it for you in a minute.
Holly claims disability benefits.
I still live with my parents, but I'm also on PIP. I have a medical condition that means I'm off sick a lot. I also have autism and ADHD.
Like most people claiming PIP, personal independence payment, she'll now face more frequent assessments and may risk losing it.
It shouldn't happen because I practically live off of it because I struggle to get buses and trains and stuff.
With PIP you can work, can't you?
Yeah, you can work with PIP. It's just the fact that I don't know if I could work full time with it, and because I'm off sick a lot, I just don't know if I could be able to hold a job.
That's why she had been looking at another option.
I'm working on getting a fit note at the moment.
That's a note from her doctor that would sign her off long-term sick. She'd get more in benefits, but the payments would stop even if she got part-time work. That's the perverse incentive the government's reforms are designed to tackle.
There are so many people I know that want to work but just can't, and because of the fit note thing.
People off sick currently get around double the amount these job seekers receive, but that will now change. The amount given in universal credit to people looking for work will go up, while the health top-up will go down and may even be stopped for under 22-year-olds.
If that sickness and disability benefit were to be reduced or indeed removed, what impact would that have on the young people that you work with?
I think you would get more young people seeking employment. There would be opportunities for them to try and find part-time work maybe that would suit with their health condition, and that would start to build their confidence with regards to actually getting a future in work.
The government says the changes are about unleashing talent. Opponents warn it'll be devastating for society's most vulnerable. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Well, it's a complicated and emotive issue. Let's bring in our panel now to discuss this in more detail. Joining me tonight, Mandy Cook, known as the autistic teacher, who's worried about the proposed welfare cuts from a professional point of view and from a personal point of view as well. We'll talk about that. Shani Dander, an ambassador for the disability charity Scope, and also James Price, a former Conservative special advisor and chief of staff to Chancellor, then Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi. Good to have your company, all of you, tonight here on the programme. And Mandy, I'm going to come to you first. When you were watching that announcement in the House of Commons today from Liz Kendall, what was your reaction? Professionally first, because you deal with a lot of families in your profession that will be affected by this, as well as your own.
There's so many families, so many in the autistic neurodivergent community that are scared. They are really worried. They're terrified that they are going to lose out. Being autistic, being neurodivergent often means that your challenges are internalised. That means people don't see them. And so when it comes to assessments or things like that, maybe they can have a conversation, but actually maybe the next day they can't. It's internal, it's internalised. And so the worry then, the terrifying thing that people are really worried about is that people won't understand when they're assessing. They may consider it as mild, but actually it's just mild to the person that's observing. That's what they're witnessing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that inside that's a mild challenge. It can be absolutely devastating.
Yeah, you talk about people being scared, you talk about people being anxious, and again, you know, that comes hand in hand often with autism, and those who feel they may be affected would have wanted some answers today, because we've been talking about this for a number of months and weeks now in the build-up to this announcement, yet the Work and Pensions Secretary couldn't confirm who and how many will be affected. We might know more come the spring statement next week. We might not have that detail. Again, this is just prolonging the worry for those affected. And I know you personally, you know, you have children, some of them with autism, 3 children with autism. And I understand that your 16-year-old is about to move onto PIP, when she hit 17. So this is relevant to you as a family because it seems that the parameters in which she will be assessed are going to change. But again, you don't know how.
Exactly. And it's that unknown as well. And for an autistic person to have that when their anxiety is high and they're worried about what's going to happen, what will I need to do, what will people see, what will people think? And again, it's that understanding of autism or even being neurodivergent. Do people actually understand it as an experience? Because it's something that you experience as a person, as a family. And it's things that you don't think about that will be affected. So for an autistic neurodivergent person, there's lots of sensory issues. Things like, they can't use public transport, so they may have to pay extra for taxis or have a car. Washing, self-care, they may need specialised clothes because of sensory issues. And this is not just people who are being picky or fussy. Some of these things are really painful. It's a real challenge.
But the Work and Pension Secretary wants to unlock their potential and help them into the workplace. We're going to talk about some of the challenges involved in that because, we get to discuss whether the workplace is ready to accommodate those who will go back into the workplace, and that comes with its own cost. I mean, we know the statistics. I think it's like 1 in 5 of those people that live with a disability are actually, employed and offered jobs. Let's bring in Shani Danda from Scope. Scope itself, the executive director of your organisation, putting out a statement earlier saying the biggest cuts to disability benefits on record should shame the government to its core.
Absolutely. I think these cuts are barbaric, and if they want to get more disabled people in work, they're not going about it the right way. When 1 in 5 employers admitted they wouldn't hire a disabled person, disabled people are twice as likely to be unemployed, and we have to apply for 60% more jobs. How on earth is cutting benefits going to get more people in work? There needs to be meaningful jobs there for people to get into.
I think there is an agreement that there has to be reform. The Conservative government recognise that, and I'm sure many people watching will agree with that. I mean, the bill has ballooned since the pandemic. It's at 65 billion. It's projected to go up to 100 billion by 2029 if something isn't done. So if we need to reform the system, how do you do it so it doesn't impact those affected?
I also agree we do need to reform the system because it's currently not fit for purpose either. If the government were really serious about this and they actually looked at it from a long-term perspective, if we close the disability employment gap, we could get up to £50 billion back into the public purse. That's way more than the saving that they're trying to make. The emphasis should be put on businesses and employers to do better and to be better employers of disabled people as well, not to reform this at the expense of disabled people and push us more into poverty.
So it's almost, rather than cutting benefits, there needs to be spending on bridging that gap between those who live with disabilities and those employers who don't feel confident or equipped to take them on. Because as Mandy was outlining there, for instance, someone who is neurodivergent in the workplace does need help, does need to be accommodated. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the employer needs to be able and willing to do it.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that this is law. This is part of the Equality Act 2010 for employers to make reasonable adjustments. However, I know some businesses feel that it might be really expensive, but it isn't. The average cost of a workplace adjustment is £75. And in addition to that, the government have their scheme called Access to Work that pays for workplace adjustments for disabled people. So from the employment perspective, there really is no excuse, but there is a lot of stigma in helping disabled people get into work. But when it comes to the impact that this is going to have on disabled people, nearly half of everyone that lives in poverty already is a disabled person or they're a carer of a disabled person. And 75% of the trust community that use their food banks are from disabled households. That's why this is so cruel for disabled people.
Yeah, the statistics are there and paint a really stark picture for anyone living with a disability. Let's bring in James Price, former Chief of Staff to then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Conservative Nadeem Zahawi. What was your reaction to this announcement from Labour today?
Thank you for having me on it. I find myself in a weird situation as a Conservative of agreeing with some of the Labour lines coming out today. The scale of the amount of money that we're talking about here is enormous. And so any kind of savings that can be made will have a big impact on other areas of spending. And I think that when you're sat around that cabinet table...
Will £5 billion a year really have a big impact? Because that was questioned by a political editor, Beth Rigby. She called it a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, I do think they're going to have to revisit this. I think it feels like the
more, you think?
Having to water. Yeah, I think they'll have to go back to it. It feels like a watering down from the original, which I think is probably a mistake because you'd want to have to give people certainty once you do this thing once. I think that everybody agrees, the Labour Party, the Conservatives, whether people would agree with me or not on this, that people who can't look after themselves, people who need support, there's nobody who doesn't want people to have that kind of support. And it was good to hear Liz Kendall say today, if somebody is never going to get better, someone like my uncle who had multiple sclerosis and couldn't move, they're only going to have to be assessed once. No, you're never going to have to go back and look at those people again, giving them peace of mind. But the scale of increase in welfare spending since the pandemic is enormous. So when you talk about the biggest cut ever, that's perhaps because it's had such a huge rise in recent years. And given that we're just not a terribly rich country in lots of ways anymore, and hopefully this government, although again, I'm a Conservative, hopefully this government gets the economy going, which will mean more money for all these sorts of things. Until then, as the world gets more dangerous, we have to spend more money on defence. There's still lots of pressures in the NHS and education and all these other important areas as well. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me that you should have a look at this enormous amount of spending. It's the biggest area of spending the government has, and there will be examples that many people will know where people have been abusing the system, and when they do abuse that system, it makes less
examples.
money.
But how is there any evidence to suggest what the scale of that is? Because you raised a really good point there in terms of fraud. How prevalent is that? Because you do think of people who claim disability benefits and then are caught, out playing football on a Saturday afternoon. You think of that. But how prevalent is that? I mean, when you look at the rising numbers, there is a lot of conversation about young people post-pandemic with mental health problems. And they seem to be the ones being targeted. People aged under 22 could be prevented from claiming universal credit top-up payments for health conditions. So, are they targeting the right people here?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think there are lots of egregious examples of fraud. And I think whenever that happens amongst older people, for example, that means less money for those who are really deserving. The examples we've heard just now. I do think, although it's very uncomfortable to talk about this, since the pandemic and mental health problems that may have arisen from everybody being, those awful moments of being locked away in our homes, that having too much empathy in the wrong place here may well be not advantageous to people's long-term prospects. The best welfare program in the world, if you can manage it, is a job, is the dignity of feeling that you're contributing. And if you're too quick to get people straight from school onto benefits rather than having any experience in the real world, that kind of mollycoddling isn't going to help those people achieve their potential. And so, again, I find myself as a Conservative backing the Labour government if it can help people get into work. And I take all the points the other contributors around employers helping people to get back into it. But hopefully we can all agree that if people can work, it's good for them and it's good for society in general that we can do that.
Yeah, Mandy, I'll come back to you because I touched on it with you before I brought in our other contributors. You work with families with autism, and in terms of those young people, those older people who want to work but can't, what would actually help them? Because it doesn't sound like taking benefits away from them is going to help at all. What they need is a supportive employer. And as we were just hearing there from Shani from Scope, 1 in 5 employers won't hire a person with a disability. There was some question that Liz Kendall is going after softer conditions. By that, people mean mental health. And obviously, that is not seen as such by those in that community and those that support them. So how can they be helped into the workplace? What would be a practical measure?
And there's various things that you can do, but absolutely cutting benefits is not going to help. By supporting into work, we would need to look at the barriers that the autistic person faces, and they can vary. It would be great to see less discrimination towards autistic people, more understanding and more flexibility. Many autistic people can cope with things one day, but then the next day, because of sensory issues which fluctuate, the next day they may not be able to. They need to have that flexibility to say, actually, today I can do it. I'm not going to be able to do it tomorrow. The next day I can. And to work with an employer. So we need to see flexibility. That would really help the autistic community, and some understanding around that fluctuation, that they're not saying, you know, I can't do it one day just for the sake of it. It's actually, it's called autistic burnout as well, where they will really, really try, but you can't see the efforts and the challenges of inside. And that means mentally, cognitively, you just run out of energy and end up burning out. And so there needs to be some flexibility to approach as well.
Shani, a final word from you, if I may, Shani Dander, Scope Ambassador. The simple fact is life does cost more if you are disabled. This is just a green paper at this stage. Lots of discussion to be had, lots more detail to come. There is expected to be a big response to what the Work and Pension Secretary has said today. We've already started to hear some of it. What do you want to see happen from this point in? Because, you know, the Work and Pension Secretary says she is listening.
I want them to understand that disabled people can and want to work. So many businesses are doing some great things in that space, but more need to do so. And I want her to understand that there are some disabled people that just can't work, and that's not their choice, but they still deserve to have access to a dignified life and access to the care and resources that they need, not to be living like this, not to be living under the stress and anxiety and benefits being cut under the narrative of we all should get into work because PIP exists to help offset extra costs. It doesn't make sense.
It's not considered by those who need it as a luxury in any way, shape or form. For so many, it's still simply not enough. Shani Dander, Scope Ambassador, thank you for your time. Also, Mandy Cook, also known as the autistic teacher, mum of three with autism, and James Price, former Chief of Staff to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Thank you for your contribution here tonight on the show. Really appreciate it. Well, we have just had some reaction from Downing Street to the call we were telling you about between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, which the Russian president agreed to cease attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure for a period of 30 days. The Downing Street spokeswoman saying this: "We welcome the progress President Trump has made towards a ceasefire, and in negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, this process must lead to a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes to ensure Russia can never launch an illegal invasion again." That reaction from Downing Street coming into us here at Sky News tonight after that phone call between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Still to come on the UK tonight, the government reenacts emergency measures to ease overcrowding in prisons. We'll have more details. And a Liverpool legend honoured by Aston Villa's most famous fan, Alan Hansen, picking up an MBE today at Windsor Castle.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us.
That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits still.
We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded.
This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Now, continuing a story which this programme has covered extensively over the past couple of months, the prison capacity in the UK is once again on the edge of crisis. The government has reenacted an emergency measure, Operation Safeguard, to hold prisoners in police custody cells, with the Justice Secretary saying that remaining space is close to critical. Well, Emma Birchley is here with more details on this. And Emma, we have seen this measure enacted a couple of times before. It's worth reminding people watching tonight what it actually means.
So what it means is that the prison service have discussions with the police and identify where there are prison cells that are available, that are free, for short-term reducing of the pressures on the prison system. Because the fact is, they're chock-a-block. We're talking about more than 99% full. So as of today, fewer than 800 spaces for men in prisons left in England and Wales. So a real problem. And actually, we're talking about it being as bad as it was the worst it's been since September. Now, September was the worst it had ever been. And if you remember, that was when these emergency measures were brought in at the time to release prisoners early. It was controversial. They were being released after just 40% of their sentences. So thousands were let out then. And the idea was that, according to the head of the Prison and Probation Service, when she was talking to a committee of MPs, it would buy a really decent chunk of time. Apparently not, because the numbers have been creeping up, which is why we are in this situation now. And in fact, on the night of March the 10th, it was the highest number of what are called no-space lockouts on record. 124 prisoners needed to go to prison. They couldn't because there wasn't a prison space, so they had to find somewhere else. This is what the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has had to say. Operating this close to critical capacity increases the risk that prisons do not have sufficient space for a given prisoner entering the system, and so an alternative has to be found, which is most frequently in a police cell. Given the recent increase in demand, it is necessary and prudent for me to temporarily reactivate Operation Safeguard to better manage the flow of offenders into the prison estate. Now, the government hopes that eventually this issue will be resolved. The idea is that by 2031, there'll be 14,000 new prison spaces. And actually, there's a new jail opening in the next few weeks, HMP Millsyke in North Yorkshire. So that's going to help 1,500 spaces there. But for now, this Operation Safeguarded is needed because there simply aren't enough jail cells for the prisoners who need them.
OK, Emma, thank you. Emma Birchley with the details of that story for us tonight. Still to come on the UK tonight, the last of the few, remembering the last surviving Battle of Britain pilot, John Paddy Hemingway, who has died at the age of 105. Tributes have been paid today to John Paddy Hemingway, the last surviving Battle of Britain pilot who died yesterday at the age of 105. As a 19-year-old, Hemingway was one of the few, that the name given by Winston Churchill to the pilots who defended the skies over Britain during the summer of 1940. Over an 11-day period, Paddy's squadron shot down 90 enemy aircraft. He later described his role in the battle as simply doing the job he was trained to do. Well, let's speak now to Jeff Simpson, historian at the Battle of Britain Memorial Trust. And Jeff, that quote there, just doing the job he was trained to do, is something that you hear a lot from those involved in World War II. No heroes here, just ordinary men doing extraordinary things for their country. But perhaps you could big him up a bit more and just tell us how significant a part he played.
Paddy Hemingway was a very modest man, and he would put it all down to luck, the fact that he survived. But of course, it wasn't like that. In 1940, Hitler, the German leader, contemplated an invasion of this country. Before he could achieve that, he had to gain air superiority over the English Channel and southeast England, and it was just under 3,000 aircrew of RAF Fighter Command who were in the forefront of ensuring that that didn't happen. Paddy Hemingway was one of them. They flew against very heavy odds and they succeeded.
Talk to me about the skill involved, because the aircraft we're looking at now, far removed from the military aircraft we see today with so much technology. It was a much more physical feat flying a plane back then.
It was. The two main types that flew in the battle were the Spitfire and the Hurricane. Paddy Hemingway was a Hurricane pilot, and they were in the majority. It was a question of very skillful flying, of constantly twisting and looking to see if there was a German coming out of the sun at you. It was instantaneous decisions, and often the bullets were flying at you from different directions. It was there was a very high casualty rate. It was very dangerous work, and as the battle wore on, part of the strain of it was that the familiar faces were disappearing around you.
John Hemingway was of Yorkshire stock, but was actually Irish, Ireland neutral in the war. Talk to me about how he became involved.
The Fighter Command was aircrew came from a large number of different countries. We think probably about 10 of them had Irish nationality. Yes, Ireland was neutral, but the Irish and British governments cooperated in various ways. That's often not realised. For example, just to give one example, weather forecasts were passed to Britain from Ireland. That was crucial in the run-up to D-Day in 1944. And many Irish people served in the British forces and in other ways aided the war effort. Of course, when they went home to Ireland, they went home in civilian clothes.
He later explained that he had no particular ambition to take up flying. It wasn't a particular passion of his, but decided on applying to the RAF after coming under pressure from his father to select a career. Talk to me about the term "the few," coined by Winston Churchill. What is the backstory to that?
The reputation of the RAF went from one extreme to another in 1940. At the time of Dunkirk, earlier in the year, the RAF was very unfairly accused of not giving enough support to the army. Then all of a sudden in the Battle of Britain, the people on the ground, the public, could see what was going on. It was happening in the air over their heads. And on August the 20th, 1940, Winston Churchill made this speech in the House of Commons in which he said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." And that term, "the few," was picked up straight away. And entered legend, and those Battle of Britain aircrew have been the few ever since.
Such a famous speech, and Captain John Paddy Hemingway at the heart of it as one of the few, and it said that he is thought to be the final member of the few.
We believe he is. You can never be certain, because many of them after the war wanted to drop out completely. They didn't want to be celebrities, and quite a few disappeared from view. As time goes on, it's more and more likely that there aren't any other survivors, and he almost certainly was the last survivor, but you can't actually prove it.
Well, Jeff Simpson, historian at the Battle of Britain Memorial Trust, really good to have you on the programme here to remember Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, who remained in the RAF. His post-war appointments included spells with NATO, the Air Ministry and command of RAF Leconfield. He ended his days in Canada with his daughter. He has died at the age of 105. John Hemingway, known as Paddy in the RAF, remembering him tonight on the programme. Coming up on the UK tonight, Thomas Tuchel has held his first training session with the full England squad as they prepare for 2 World Cup qualifiers. We'll bring you all the details.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre. Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent. A show of military might and menace. Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day. It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov. The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past. There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we are to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a 5th Putin term mean for Russia and the world? Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West. Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News? Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, who was first on display. Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Hello, welcome back. David Garrido is here with the sport, and it has been well, it says here big week. I'm going to say huge week for a rather towering figure at Newcastle Football Club. Their defender Dan Burn, not only scoring at Wembley in that now famous Carabao Cup win, but also getting his first England call-up.
Yeah, listen, I think this is so well-deserved and a long time coming, isn't it, for Dan Burn, because he's one of the game's characters. We've seen him dancing in the changing rooms before. He's a proper Geordie lad. We love, seeing him and hearing from him. But admittedly, at sort of 32 years of age, would he play for England? Probably, he admitted himself it might pass him by. Might have even thought that winning a major trophy might pass him by, but of course Newcastle changed that, as you said, on Sunday at Wembley, and he scored the first goal, first domestic trophy for Newcastle in 70 years. Just days before then, he'd found out that he had been called up into Thomas Tuchel's first England squad for the World Cup qualifiers at home to Albania and away to Latvia on Monday, although it was not a sure thing. Let's let Dan Burn himself explain.
Manager FaceTimed us on Tuesday and saying that they were debating calling us up, and he'd let us know by Thursday, and then I got a sort of 6 o'clock Thursday night and not heard anything, so I said to my wife, I was like, I don't think nothing's going to happen, and then I got a text saying, oh, you're still awake at 10, and I was like, yes, straight away.
What did he say to you?
He just said, well, first of all, he said I was very unprofessional for not being in bed for 10 o'clock, so so I apologise for that.
A likeable figure, Dan Burn. He was involved as all 26 players trained under Tuchel for the very first time, with 3 additions as well from the under-21s, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, Liam Delap and Adam Wharton. Cole Palmer, by the way, still being assessed by Chelsea, but he's very unlikely to be involved in these games. Burn could be England's oldest debutant for 15 years.
Love a story
since
like that.
Kevin Davis.
Love a story like that,
yeah. He was 33 when he played for England in 2010. Harry Maguire and Ben White are injured, so he has got a chance as playing potentially as one of the centre-backs. We will see if Thomas Tuchel is feeling like he wants to, give him even more of a kind of like late revival in his career. Then he could be lining up against Albania at Wembley on Friday.
OK, what did Thomas Tuchel say after that first training session? Was he pleased with the squad he assembled, all positive and upbeat at this stage?
Yeah, and he's also just one of those. He's really very charming, very, he's got that real kind of like character, hasn't he, at the moment, and enjoying the job right now ahead of his first game after his first 3 months.
And when is the first game? Remind us.
Friday against Albania at Wembley. So that's as far as Dan Burn and England are concerned. But there is one of the WSL sides in European action tonight.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
It's no secret Wenger needs world-class defenders. Dozens of clubs are sure to be keeping an eye on Campbell's contract talks.
Arsene always had to identify the talent. It was never my decision, because he had to coach them, he had to motivate them, he had to train them, and I have actually executed his wishes. Once we knew that Sol Campbell could be available, then we had to go into overdrive, because he was such a prized possession.
Arsenal's history, we were trying to win trophies, and by adding Sol Campbell to that defence, it meant that we were going to win more trophies, because he was that much of a good player.
If you want to be successful at club level, then you've got to keep your best players, and Sol Campbell, without a shadow of a doubt, is one of those.
Obviously, it's so important to the team. I mean, Sol's a great player. I'm sure if Sol was put up for sale, then...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Staying with the sports theme and continuing the good news, a Liverpool legend and former Match of the Day pundit, Alan Hansen, has been awarded an MBE for his services to football and to broadcasting. He accepted the honour earlier today from Prince William during an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle. Hansen spent 14 years as a Liverpool player, winning 8 First Division titles, as well as 3 European Cups and 2 FA Cups. He spent time in hospital last June, with a club describing him at the time as seriously ill, but looking fit and healthy today and very happy, which is lovely to see.